So I'm here with another edition. What the hell am I saying already? What the fuck? I'm here on another edition, live from the Creosote Casita with my dear brother, one of like my favorite people on the entire planet, Shane Thunder. You may have seen him recently on Most Expensivest with 2 Chainz. Literally, like, seeing your friend in a cartoon form with 2 Chainz is something I will forever cherish. It's like, I called Shane and I was like, dude, you in cartoon form, like, is like life goals. Like, it's giving me so much life. He's like, dude, me with 2 Chainz as a cartoon is life. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually a better statement. So let me tell you about this light worker, light leader, sound practitioner. Personally, I feel like he's like the best sound healer on the planet. Like, truly. Last night, that sound bath that we had at Bhakti Fest, it's like a 2-hour sound bath to like 1:30. Even Bud was like digging it.
Yeah.
Was hands down one of the most profound sound baths I've ever had, and I wasn't even on psychedelics, right? So I'm just like, just being in that space and having all these different instruments and like seeing how they all blended together. There was so much healing and so much rewiring of my brain and my thought patterns that I was like, okay, cool, this shit works. I mean, I already knew that. I do sound healing myself. Like, Shane's the one that really helped open the doors for me to teach at festivals, which is why I'm so forever grateful for this beautiful individual and human being who's just like on this mission to help people awaken to their highest selves and to really tap into spirit within and without. And so, yeah, I'm just so grateful for him. And, you know, we all know, I want you to dive more into it because you know a lot more about the power of sound. And we were talking yesterday, and anytime I talk with Shane, we really go in, and then we're like, whoa, where did we just go? And so there's no accident why sound healing and all these other modalities, I think especially for our generation and our era, it's so appealing. Because like a place like Bhakti Fest, it's so devotional and all this like kirtan and everything, while that is beautiful, to me what brings the most healing is going to the sound baths and like the sound temple. And Shane literally sets these up all over. Like, he is like the sound guy at festivals, creating these temples and these sacred spaces. And so before I go any further, I just want to thank you for your commitment and your devotion to creating these experiences and these portals of light for people to really transmute their shadows, transmute the darkness. And this to me is hands down one of my favorite healing modalities. We're just scratching the surface, and I know you feel that way too. So I would love for you to talk about the power of sound, using this as the 7th dimension is sound. And so to use sound as a way to heal and restructure our DNA.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the power of sound with just the multitude of applications that are being used in science, being used in medicine, being used in a lot in our metaphysical world. You know, it's because of its versatility through the use of destroying cancers to, you know, there's been some studies that have even been released that sound travels faster than light. So, you know, like that whole possibility of breaking the very reality of what we have come to know about energy, about vibration, about light, and how this greater affects just kind of the whole environment that we're constantly experiencing on a daily practice is, it really sets a precedence for just how much we can do with it. And, you know, being able to give people the opportunity to just take a moment, you know, whether it's a second in their breath or it's an hour of their journey of being in a sound experience, to really just tap in with what their own truth is. And whether that truth be, this is your trauma, this is your transmutation, this is your path, this is your vision, you know, so much of the power of sound is so kind of rooted in this whole aspect, at least in my experience of doing this over the past 7 years. I think what's kind of slightly contradictory and slightly ironic about it is that so much of it isn't even about the sound, it's about the silence.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much about,
that's the integration.
yeah, and it's so much about this process that we go through on a daily journey of being in this rat race and being in this kind of constant, like, you know, moving on to the next and moving on to the next, like, you know, where are you going to eat? Where are you going to go take a shit? Like, how are you paying your rent? Where are you going to work? You know, like, who are you going on a date tonight? What kind of drinks are you having? You know, like, who are you going to fuck? All of these types of things. And it's just like, when does all of that get to just be quiet? Whether it be for a moment or whether it be for an hour. When do we actually have the time to allow whatever it is that is driving us, waking us up every day, making us go to sleep, which truly embodies our purpose, when does that actually get to have a voice? Outside of all the programs and the stories and all of these things that really kind of distract us for why we're really here and why we chose back to come into this life, why and what we're leaving behind. Not necessarily in terms of, you know, what we're remembered as for our legacy, but more so of that, what do we leave behind for our children? What do we leave behind for how we affected people? You know, there's an old Banksy quotes that talks about, you know, I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit because I don't remember the exact full quote, but essentially he talks about, you know, you die twice. The first time when you first kind of like leave your body, and then the second time is a little bit later when the last person that knows you speaks your name. And I find that it's a really important journey of discovery as well as a journey of remembrance when we can find the time to be quiet so that we can actually figure out how are we leaving this world. Not only strung into the experience of the planet and how we can leave it better, but then also on top of that, how do we immortalize ourselves through how we affect others? Because is this the whole thing about eternity? Is this the whole thing about clearing the path, getting real with why we're here, and getting real with how to achieve the highest aspects of what we want to accomplish and how those accomplishments actually really set the precedence for our own success, that are absent any story, absent any, you know, conditioning, absent any programming that comes from our tradition, comes from our culture, comes from our society. And this is where I think the value of sound healing and the value of sound meditation is not only quite prevalent in our kind of growing popularity of this type of I don't want to say new modality, but this opportunity that so many
it's
of
like
us...
noteworthy reality.
Yeah, and, you know, like, being part of this kind of sound healing culture over the past, give or take, about 7 years, you know, and especially very much being really involved from a producer level of creating these types of these areas and these environments, has really created this ability to observe from a third party perspective of watching the community grow and watching more and more and more sound healers popping up out of the woodwork everywhere, which has been great. And it's been really just a nourishing channel to my own heart to see so many more people deciding to take upon the mantle of responsibility that would justify their reasoning for wanting to bring this out into the world. And I'd say about 90% of people who I know who are facilitators of sound, they were all using it on themselves before they decided.
Totally, that was their medicine.
Yeah, that was their medicine. So, you know, and then how this swings back to people who are experiencing it, people who are sharing it, people who are just involved in it in whatever way possible. It's really created this container of allowing people to, on the surface, as more and more people are getting into it, I've been seeing more and more people getting into it just because it's like, it's super relaxing, it's really meditative, it's like, we joke about it in the community from time to time that it's kind of like the lazy man's meditation. You don't have to know a kriya, you don't have to do yoga, you don't have to like do all of this kind of like,
it's like a yin approach.
yeah, it's much more passive, you know. And so so for people's ability to just go down to a local yoga studio or go to a festival and just lay down and just get their rest and get their respite from say a 30 to an hour experience is great. But then being able to take it even further, where they actually use sound to dislodge or to kind of break whatever barrier is currently keeping them from achieving this particular aspect of themselves in their healing, or achieve this particular aspect of what they are desiring in their social, economic, or professional life. You know, it's been a great journey to watch evolve, especially because sound healing, with where it was, you know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was nowhere near, you know, you could.
Well, that's how I met you. It was like, we were at this small festival in San Diego. It was like Elements Festival, 5 Elements Festival or something. And I just came back from my first burn. I just finished Kundalini teacher training, and I went to this festival. And Shane was there in this small little tent attached to our friend Dr. Nick, who does essential oils. And it was like me and one of my girlfriends. Like, it was just the two of us. And we were at your booth, you know, like little, you just like really squished by all your bowls, you know. And I was like, oh, I'm super interested, you know, like I just did teacher training and I want to get a set and blah, blah, blah. And then I reached out to you because you were running Desert Hearts, and that was the first festival I taught at after coming back from John of God.
Sure.
And so to see the evolution from that small little tent, to see you create these massive fucking sound temples at festivals where you can't find space, like everyone's coming in. And your setup is like evolving. We joke, like when we went to Burning Man together 2 years ago, we had like probably 60 instruments in the car, plus all of our camping stuff. It was like insane. And it's amazing to see how the reaction of people, you know, like seeing people weep for the first time in a long time, seeing those energetic blocks, working with these higher frequencies, because each of these different notes emit at different frequencies as well, right? And this is why it's really important to be aware of the music you're listening to.
Of course.
You know, as a former music journalist, I'm so sensitive to sound. Like, if it's shit music, I was telling Shane yesterday, I was like, honestly, if the music is shit, it's better that I'm not there, because I would be ruining everyone's vibe, because I'm just like so pissed. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, it'd be better for me just to walk away than to listen to shit music, because I'm so sensitive to these frequencies now, post being struck by lightning, being a sound healer myself, and being able, and a former music journalist, that I can feel. And it can be scary too, because there can be a lot of the brain, mind control, and all of that using sound, because it's a higher dimension than the 3D we're living in, slowly anchoring in this 5D unity consciousness as the baseline, because we don't want to get trapped there. There's higher, as of now, we know that there's 12 dimensions that we can reach, but to be aware of the purity of the music you're listening to and how it makes you feel, like that's what you need to immerse yourself more in than just listening to shit music that's like kind of leaving you unconscious. And that's what makes sound healing so powerful, especially when you're using like the alchemy bowls that are infused with other gemstones and things like that, because then you're also getting the frequency of those minerals into being blended and blessed into that sound penetration into your body.
Yeah, and I think that's the journey for every soul that finds their way into a sound bath. You know, when we were at Burning Man, I think the night of the man burn, you know, there was this individual there who, he was of Asian descent. He stumbled upon our camp, stumbled upon the sound bath. Ava Tar and I, Ava Tar is based in Orange County, so anybody listening to this, if if you're down there, definitely go check her out at the
She's
Montage.
amazing.
She's
Yeah.
an absolute amazing sound healer, and is one of the few facilitators in the Orange County area. You know, we facilitated the sound experience for them at the burn, and afterwards he came to me in absolute tears, you know, just telling me about this profound experience that he had, and as he was describing the discoveries and the remembrance of the compartmentalization of his shame, the varying aspects of how he was affected through the sound, combined with the things that came up for him because of it, it was a direct reflection of my own story, of my own growth, of my own journey of my childhood of abuse, of my childhood of physical abuse with my parents, particularly my mother. And, you know, I'm literally sitting here listening to him tell his story, and I'm like,
What a mirror.
this is me right now. This is literally myself telling me myself of the exact same journey. And it was this very interesting reminder, and very much especially moments before the man burned. And how, you know, if anybody listening is not familiar with Burning Man, in the sense of what happens during the ceremonial aspect of the man burning, it becomes a very pivotal point for the whole, you know, 60,000, 70,000 people that are there at the playa, who, you know, are literally dissolving pieces of themselves that no longer serve, and, you know, that dissolution comes from so many various things, from tears, from screaming, from yelling, from dancing, to just this kind of like conflagration of what happens underneath the man as he literally is set on fire. And I'm still to this day curious of when they're gonna have like Burning Woman, but, you know.
To me, that felt like organ eclipse.
Yeah.
It felt like, because it was like water and nourishment in that way, and just to see that whole experience. I mean, that's why I really didn't go to festivals this year, is because I'm still integrating like that profound of like experience as it was, and then having literally people from all over the world come into this space to like heal and connect. Like, to me, it just felt like our Woodstock.
Yep.
You know, and that's why this year I just really took a back seat this year of festivals, and luckily like Bhakti's down the street from my house, and I was like, well, I'm literally going just to see Shane, because I need medicine from Shane's from his gifts. And yeah, it's really fascinating too, because I feel what's cool is like there's a nice balance of men and women that go to these sound baths, and I feel like it's a huge opportunity for men to soften, and it's a huge opportunity for women to release.
Yep, completely agree. And we were, you know, Sabrina and I were just talking about this yesterday, about how, especially because of the capacity for sound to shift immediately, you know, I've had some people tell me in sound baths, you know, just like, I've been carrying this weight on my shoulders for 10, 15 years, and I don't even know how long this experience was, but I feel so much resolution from it. We actually had a woman last night who came up to me afterwards, after the last sound bath, and she was just kind of like, who are you people? You know, like, this is my first time at Bhakti, this is my first time experiencing something like this, and I don't even have the words, nor even the financial support to give you enough of, to express the kind of profound just expression of what this means to me. And it's been critical feedback like that over the years of carrying that from person to person to person, which has also been a reflection of my own journey with it. Because just in the same way, this was always my medicine. It was, and I think, you know, people have kind of forgotten our connection to sound, which is in a direct correlation to our connection to ourselves. And
we are frequency.
Yeah, we are frequency, you know, and it's a shame, really, because, you know, in the ancient times and in ancient cultures, we didn't have music. There was no word for it. Sound was always for ceremony. Sound was always for ritual. You know, and as a human species, we have forgotten that connection to that divinity. We've forgotten that connection to that divine birthright of not even like the God or, you know, oneness or the universe, but just that connection to ourselves, and how that strips us of our inability to actually connect with one another on such a deep level. You know, there's only more and more studies coming out now talking about addiction and all these things that are huge mental health problems, and a lot of it all goes back to the lack of community and the lack of connection. And
which is what the Aquarian age is all about.
Right, totally. And you know, and it's interesting, even through my own reflection of why I was doing drugs when I was younger, why I was partying so much, why I was doing all these things. Escapism, all these things, was because I had a lack of connection and I had a lack of community, not only from the external world, but also to myself.
Totally, and I completely feel you on that. When I would like really abuse MDMA and stuff, I was eating it all the time,
sure.
so to connect
Same.
with God.
Mm-hmm.
Because for so long I was angry with God because I had so much trauma and pain and suffering that I'm like, what the fuck is this thing called life? Like, it's
right.
so challenging and it's full of suffering. And then MDMA blasted my heart open that I was like, oh my God, this is what life is about. It's about God, like really being in that essence of God, and to be in that space of total communion and recognizing not only is love always present, but it's God's spirit universe is always present and is always communicating to us in the most subtle of ways.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a lot of people who experiment now with plant medicines and work with these tools, this was not their initial intention, right?
Right.
The initial intention was the escapism or to figure out who they are or to party, you know, and then they just got bitch slapped time and time again. And they're like, wow, there's something deeper. Like, I feel like there's no accident why our generation in this era is focusing and doing more research on plant medicines and all these various tools, like alternative healing modalities, to really heal, because we came here to heal. We came here to support one another and to see each other. And it's been a journey just to see how, you know, people who used to go super hard all the time, like now they barely touch alcohol, or they're going to events sober, and being more discerning on when they use these medicines. And it's not like, oh, we're just gonna go to a party, so let's just like pop these things, you know. Like, it's been challenging to see the rise of like cocaine again, and the rise of like ketamine.
Yep.
And that's so, it's about the disassociation, right? It's like everyone's escaping, and this is what my passion is to like help people dive in to do the healing, because the only way out is through. And when you're going through these like really good sound healings and journeys, it's a journey, right? You go through all the ways of emotion, and you the only way out is through. It's the best way to put it. You can't just like band-aid it or jump over it, forget about it, because then it's gonna avalanche and it's gonna bitch slap you.
Yeah, and I mean unfortunately that's like the Western model.
It's weird, it turned off.
Yeah, very weird.
I hope I don't lose it. Hold on. Yeah, hold on. I'll change battery. Hold, please. This is going good.
No, no worries.
This is what happened. I need to get reusable batteries. This is gonna good.
I'm surprised it doesn't have like a charger thing.
It's annoying.
You'd think with all our technology.
Okay. talking about
Oh. Shit.
so good. We ate all the juice.
It's like,
You're not gonna stop.
you're just out of batteries?
I don't know what's happening.
And you normally never does this?
Never.
Too high vibe, man. Too high vibe.
This is amazing.
We literally broke your recording. We broke your podcast.
You broke my podcast.
Too high vibe, bro. Too high vibe.
Too high vibe. Wait, what?
Is like the SD card full or something?
No, it says 19 hours.
What is it saying? Like, or does
It just turns
it
off.
just keeps turning on. What the fuck? Are all those batteries brand new? Really? Wow, dude. Oh my God. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear it? This is
Nice.
You guys are never going to believe this. This talk is so high vibe. We just went through like 4 batteries on my recorder. This is insane.
Wow. Wow. Too much, bro. Too much.
What were we even talking about?
Disassociation, drugs. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No.
Oh.
Talk?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, you can hear me now.
Okay.
Cool.
So we're talking about disassociation and drugs.
Yeah, just the rise of like cocaine again, the rise of ketamine, like people diving like further deeper into plant medicine and
Disassociation.
kind of disassociation, but also getting like like awoken,
Mm-hmm.
getting the proverbial bitch slap of like, hey, you need to wake the fuck up, and I think this is the interesting kind of correlation between the sensation of sound healing. I was actually just describing this to Gracie the other night about how she was asking me, like what do you do? Like what drugs do you do? What medicines do you partake in? And I was like, I don't really do anything anymore because I don't really, one, I got that out of my system years ago, and then 2, I was even having a conversation with somebody on Facebook about it this morning about how like there's just nothing else in the world that gets me higher than sound healing. And which by extension, there is nothing that gets me higher than the connection to myself. And
What I loved about you, we were talking too about like your sadhana, your daily practice.
Sure.
And you were talking about my sadhana is my breath. And that was so profound. It's like your daily practice is your breath.
Right. And I think that's it really sets a precedence, not even necessarily in the way that I approach my reality or that I would, proclaim that like, oh, my way is better than everybody else's fucking way, but more so that in my journey through this kind of conscious community and through this like spiritual pursuit of things, I've always found it very interesting of how people, they make these proclamations to, like, oh, I do my morning sadhanas, I do my morning kriyas, or, I do my kriyas and like I do my yoga practice and all this stuff, yet you are still completely susceptible, as you should be. We're human, no one's perfect. But people still partake and are still completely ingrained in all of their bullshit.
They're not walking the talk.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily that I'm coming from a space of judgment, but more so from a space of observation. Actually, no. Let me take a step back. I am judging. I'm just not passing judgment. There's a very, very clear difference.
We all judge.
Yeah, we all judge, but passing judgment is what I attempt to do very, very little of, because it's so interesting to see these people talk about all of these things that they do in their spiritual pursuits, and as you kind of brought it up earlier, a majority of people partake in their spirituality as a band-aid to kind of just, which is still very much so.
It's a step in the right direction.
It's a step in the right direction, but it's still very much ingrained.
It's surface level.
Surface level combined with, it's still based in Western philosophy of how, in Western ideologies of their approach to medicine, and like, oh, don't worry about the cause of it. Just find the symptoms and just pamper it a little bit, and you'll be fine. And it's just like, no, uproot the goddamn thing and transmute it, change it, because from what I've seen, not only in people's healing, but also very much more importantly my own, like healing, the community has this whole perception around healing that it's like, oh, I'm gonna do these things and then I'm gonna wipe them and they're gonna go away and they're forever.
It's like a destination, like they're gonna get to like a final
Right.
when it's like ever flowing.
Right, and that like, oh my God, I'm gonna be so pure and so, like released from and enlightened and released from this. And the reality of it is, healing isn't about washing something away. Healing is so much more about changing the relationship that you have with your trauma, that you have with your issues, that you have with your challenges that you face on a daily practice.
And that's the miracle. It's that shift of perception. Like,
Right.
of course, Miracle says a miracle is a shift of perception from fear to love.
Right.
So to understand that whatever you've endured is happening for you and not to you. And part of the healing journey is being able to share what has healed you to other people. Because if you went through that, there's most likely someone else is going through it too.
Exactly.
Same, but different, right?
And that's the interesting thing too. I've been getting more into a practice of that whole expression of like, oh, things come full circle. They don't come full circle. They come full spirals.
Totally.
And it's the
helix.
It's the helix. It's the toroidal nature of our experience. It's why when you may go through a healing process and then the next day you're fine. The next day you're also fine. 2 weeks later you're good. 2 months later you get slammed with the exact same experience, the exact same situation, but in a different vibration, in a different template. And then you get to either, I wouldn't say react, but you get to take the choice of either abiding by the quote unquote healing that you've done and making the better choice of, wow, this actually doesn't trigger me as much as it used to be, or falling back into the exact same loop that you've constantly been in.
Totally.
And this is where I feel the community needs to, for the lack of a better expression, needs to grow the fuck up about it. Because we are so self-serving in our pursuit of, which, by a certain distinction, of course it's self-serving. It's highly self-serving to heal, but it's more so that it becomes this kind of indoctrination of that, like, oh, I'm gonna go out and sin, and then I'm just gonna go and heal, and then I'm just gonna keep going and doing it again, as long as I can, like, kind of keep pampering the issue, rather than actually getting real deep into it, diving deep into the shadow, and really allowing that faint light that you shine to light the way through the tunnel.
Totally, it's the yin and yang, right? There's always a little piece of light in the dark and a little piece of dark in the light.
Yeah. And the yang, I feel like the yang is so much more important, you know, because the community talks so much about, you know, like, oh, you know, like the light, and it's like, okay, cool, that's great, but tell me about your darkness.
Totally.
Tell me about what has made you who you are.
That's what makes me really irritated with the good vibes only movement.
Oh, I know.
It's so not real.
Yeah.
It's not authentic to your human experience.
Right. It's such a spiritual bypass.
Totally.
And this is where, you know, and I know some people who may be listening to this is like, what does this have to do with the power of sound? This is actually where it comes full spiral, is that the sound healing and the sound meditation, the sound bath, the use of sound in whatever way possible that it's being done, either in a one-on-one experience or in a group activity, this is where it provides the template for being able to reveal all of these things, to be able to reveal every aspect of your realizations,
totally,
of what you may be spiritually bypassing, what you may be holding on to, what traumas you're carrying, what things, what resentments, what, like, you know, illusions, belief patterns that really absolutely no longer serve who you are. And
I feel like this is what this summer was about. When you're talking about like the spiralization, I feel like for me, this summer felt like me circling back to everything of 2012.
Yeah, totally.
That's what it felt like for me, and that's why I feel like it was a lot more like hermit and like introspection, because 2012, that summer, kicked my ass, you know, and to see where I've come now,
right,
when those things come up and are triggered again, one, seeing like it doesn't give me as much, and two, how can I transmute it by understanding that there's still fragments from that time that are still yearning for my love or forgiveness or whatever is coming, arising in that space where I can like honor younger Sabrina and give the love that I needed at that time, or that understanding, or hear out.
And I think we had actually touched base about this maybe during the summer, about how it was interesting that even though we've been on this path for X amount of years, that we've known each other for this amount of time, for X amount of years, why does it feel like we're starting all over again?
Yeah, it was like a Groundhog Day.
Yeah, you know, like where this all feels too familiar again, you know, and like I know very much so in my own experience of having pursued this for the past 7 years, this year has literally wrung me out
Totally.
in so many different ways, reminding me of why I show up, reminding me of why I decided to move on this path, the sacrifices and the commitments that I've had to make due to that, and the things that I've had to, I don't want to say give up, but more set aside for the greater good. And not even necessarily for the greater good of myself, but for the greater good of the community and the greater good of our species, like, and bringing
Totally.
a greater harmony and balance, and not even necessarily,
It's like being selfless in
Yeah.
a way.
well,
It's like allowing that space to be like, okay, remembering your intention on why you started.
right. And it's interesting because, you know, I think a lot of people, you know, this kind of goes back to our conversation about the whole concept of being a warrior. You know,
I would love to dive into this.
And it really plays into this whole idea that, like, you know, because, you know, there's this whole expression of like warriors of light, especially as sound facilitators. You know, we can infuse our energy with this tool or with this template that can like be so far more reaching than the capacity of just what we have within our own vessels and within our own kind of physical energy to constantly keep doing. And I find it so interesting where there is this level of self-proclamation that comes when we really begin to get in our spiritual ego, where as a yoga teacher or as a Reiki master or as a
Identifying.
identifying with the whole like, I'm a warrior and I'm gonna save you. You know, and it's this, and it's interesting because, you know, I'm guilty of it. I lived that life for the first 3 years of my path, and I came to the realization that it's not even so much of doing this proclaiming from above high, from the mountaintop screaming down to the valley below. It's really more about the integration of coming down from the mountain, keeping not necessarily your voice silent, but keeping the integration within, and then leading by example.
Mm-hmm.
And that there could be no greater energy that precedes you than the reputation that you set for yourself by leading by that example.
Through your beingness.
Through your beingness and through your embodiment, which then goes back to this whole thought that you were talking about earlier about that, my sadhana is my breath. My practice is my being in the embodiment of what I hold and uphold myself to. And part of how I got there is because of the power of sound. Was through the use of getting really deeply, intimately knowledgeable about who I am and who I am to the world, and how I take those steps in every way, in every possible direction that I can, in the kind of flow of journeying with spirit, not as this thing that I'm seeking to find, but more so that I have, and it guides me in every direction that I'm willing to shift and move through. And I think this goes back to another aspect of the power of sound, especially when it comes to, for those of us who are listening, who have challenges with drugs, with challenges with addiction and partying and all of these things, who are, whether you want to realize it or not, your lack of community or your lack of connection, either to yourself or to those around you, are what drive every aspect of your trauma and every aspect of your decision, whether you know it subconsciously or not, and whether you can tangibly realize it in your conscious breath in this moment as you're listening to this. It is doing it in some way, shape, or form. And to be able to dive deep within yourself, to, especially if you're experiencing a sound bath, to be able to come out of the experience with what could quintessentially be described as a breath of fresh air. In the feedback that I've gotten from so many different people, that I feel like a whole weight has been lifted from me, that I can actually breathe for the first time. And I've heard this from cancer patients, from people who have dealt with rape, people who have dealt with emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, every which way that you could imagine your trauma being holding you down. There is some level of release that can occur from this, and to be able to feel just a little bit more complete, or a little bit more one with who you are, is very much so what sound and meditation can do for any particular person. And I think that's why it's also becoming a much more popular modality now, because you don't have to know a guru, you don't have to do yoga, you don't have to read the autobiography of Yogi Bhajan to whatever, I obviously don't read these things, and it's the interesting journey around this stuff, because a lot of the mental perceptions that I've come to realize about all of these things, for years people used to ask me who was your guru, what books did you read, what school did you go to, what philosophers have you studied, and all of this stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
You're your greatest teacher.
Yeah, and this was all through, all these understandings came through, of course, in certain respects, reading research papers, but really a majority of it was just me diving deeper into myself and coming to understand that my way of interacting with the world is just a direct reflection of the way that I want to interact with myself. And that whole expression of, if you want to know more about the world, just know yourself more. And
it's the inner creating the outer.
Right. And and I can't describe to our listeners how much, with every fiber of my being, with every fiber of my breath, for everything that I stand for in this life, that when you experience a sound bath for the first time, and when I experienced the sound bath for the first time, I remember coming out of it completely, I felt like I was on heroin. And not that I've ever done heroin, but I've done enough mind-altering drugs and being in alternate states to know this like high of highs. I definitely have dosed myself enough with MDMA to know, like, when my eyes are rolling in the back of my head, what that feeling of euphoria feels like. And the feeling and sensation of what the sound bath was post like 5 minutes of me walking out the door, I remember feeling this level of euphoria like times 1,000. And the fact that I was sober when I felt this, and the fact that I was so familiar with being in altered states that I could recognize this almost immediately as like, whoa, wait a minute. I have never felt anything like this before. No synthetic drug, no natural medicine, no nothing has ever taken me to this space. And now, because I've been doing this for so many years, and because I facilitate anywhere from 5 to 15 sound baths a month, I am always constantly in this state. And it's not even so much that the sound healing creates the environment as to which you get to kind of relate to this feeling or sensation. It actually is a direct line and connection to that state of yourself that you can access.
And you're living your dharma doing the work too, which is why there's not as much of like exploring of, because you're trusting that like everything is always presented to you because you are going out there and living your purpose, you're living your dharma, your truth.
Right.
That it's not like you're on this search.
Right. You know, and it's interesting because I remember encountering a Native American, you know, probably about our age, and he and I were having conversations about our relationship to reality, and I remember it was such a polemic piece to what became a very large cornerstone to the rest of my journey, and this happened about 4.5 years ago, where as we were talking about things, he was like, you know, you're a peculiar one, and I was like, how so? And he was like, well, I find that a lot of people in like the spiritual conscious and like hippie communities, you know, when you all talk about spirit, when you all talk about the universe, when you all talk about like this oneness stuff, you all talk about it like you've lost it. Mm-hmm. And this is why you do drugs. This is why you do mushrooms. This is why you do acid. This is why you do ketamine and all of these things, because you are going into it thinking that you've lost it, and then you go into it thinking you need to find it, when you're a little different. And I was like, yeah, how so? And he was like, the way you talk about your connection to reality and your connection to spirit, it's almost as if you use your connection to spirit as the template of how you relate to reality.
Totally.
And I was like, well, right, because how else could I relate to reality if it weren't for it? And then everything else disseminates from that.
Because that's all that's real.
That's
right?
all, yeah, and that's all that there is. The ether creates the contexture of all of these other pieces that are the physical, are the mental, are the emotional, are the energetics. And
metaphysical.
And the whole metaphysical aspects. Yeah. And that's where, you know, by the extension of what spirit meta sin is all about, is this kind of correlation and congruency of that what we are experiencing in our metaphysical world, from the physical, from the mental, from the emotional, then blends with the ether and provides us this template of like, oh wow, everything that I need to heal, I actually already have it.
Yeah, because even when we think it's outside of us, then we're actually giving away our power.
Exactly.
Which has been a huge part of it too. So that's why there has been such the strong evolution of the self-realization path.
Right.
Is to help everyone understand that everything, you already know all the answers within you. It's about you transcending the limits that have been placed on you based off of society, ancestral, trauma, whatever it is. That's the work, is clearing that out so that you can come into this pureness of who you are at the core.
And I think that's the pureness at the core. I think I think one of the driving things of what people don't want to go in that direction is that once you actually get to that pureness, once you actually get to all that clearing, now what do you do? Because that's actually even the greater question. It's not even necessarily the journey of getting there. It's what do you do after?
What do you do with it?
And what do you do with it? Because at that point, you can't really live in a real world. You can't live in the what we call in the Burning Man community, the default world. It's very difficult because now you are, for the lack of a better expression, you're aware.
It's like you ate the red pill.
Yeah, totally. And you know, and it's like, it's interesting because the conscious and the spiritual community tend to, they gyrate around this whole idea that like the whole path and pursuit of spirituality and consciousness is this whole above high enlightenment. When in the reality of it, at least in my experience, I disagree. It's about choice. It comes down to choice.
And that goes back to silence.
Right. And right.
Because to make those choices is about you going in, feeling what resonates, what feels expansive, what feels contracted.
Yeah, choosing to have a straw in your drink because how it affects the oceans. Choosing to have the awareness to have a straw in your drink because it affects the oceans, because it affects the animals, because it affects our planet, because it affects, you know, a person in China that might have nothing to do with you, but it's still...
But they're getting paid 10 cents an hour.
Yeah, you know, and, you know, to be completely honest, I'm guilty of it. We went and ate yesterday, and I forgot to ask the waiter to not put a straw in my drink. And there it was in my drink, and I was like, fuck.
And when you see this too, it's also not to beat yourself up because that's part of the unlearning too.
Right.
So it's like, don't shame yourself. It's it happens, but learn from it, right? If we make these mistakes, understand that it's happening for you to learn from it. Don't beat yourself up because of it, because you are human.
Right. And I think this is where the power of sound really allows you the opportunity for that grace.
And to create that space.
And to create that moment of, instead of initial impulsive reaction of like, oh, you fucked up, you got a straw. More so of like, hey, don't forget next time.
I'll choose better.
That I'll choose better and remind myself to not, you know, to not get a straw. And
well, it's just being more conscious, right? Of like how something so simple is affecting so many other layers that aren't seen.
Right.
It's on the subtle realm.
Totally. And I mean, like, and I think that's the path and the opportunity of sound is the reclamation. The reclamation of who we truly are before we were told who to be. And, you know, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine about this the other day, about like how a lot of people, you know, she lives a little bit more in the default world, and, you know, she was talking about how sometimes she feels like, you know, like people are judging her, or that people that we grew up in high school are like pitying her because, you know, she doesn't have a house, she hasn't been married yet, she doesn't have kids and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, my first thought was, don't fucking worry about them. Second thought was, who the fuck really cares? And then thirdly, at the end of the day, you have created an opportunity for yourself to not settle, to not subscribe to the reality that you were told to live, and combined on that, above all else, and I know some people may disagree with me in the next statement I'm about to make, but those people who have gotten into all that, you know, going to college, getting married, having kids, I mean this to offend nobody, but a lot of people who subscribe to that reality are fucking lazy. They are truly lazy. Like, in not the description of being that, I'm sure everybody who's listening works hard, that they do that they put a lot of energy and intention into what they do. But in the reality of it, when it comes to personal development, when it comes to dislodging yourself from the programming and the conditioning of our traditions, of our culture, of our parents, of our friends, of our families, and all of these things that go back, our communities, that go back generations. You're lazy. And it's not exactly easy for everyone. Everyone has their own path, and everybody is going to have their varying level of difficulty pursuing what it is that actually really gets them up in the morning.
Because the path of self-realization is not.
It's violent. It's violent.
It's the tower in tarot, right? It's like you're dismantling everything that's been built, and you're questioning everything.
Right.
Like what resonates with you? Like I've been saying lately, instead of take what you need and leave the rest, it's what resonates with. Take what resonates and release the rest.
Yeah. Right?
Because we all have our own experiences that have shaped us into who we are.
And I think, it's funny, because some people have talked to me about it in the past where they're just like, yeah, well, it's easy for you, Shane, like you've been living this life for X amount of years and all this stuff. They might be right, but it was never easy.
It goes by choice.
Yeah, it goes by choice. I chose to pursue this path, but I also chose to set my boundary with the universe that if I'm going to live this life truly embodied, then you have to take care of me. Like, I will not do this if I'm going to be poor. A lot of people in the communities, from healers to artists to all of these things, have that inner work to do to allow themselves to be supported.
And I think the biggest piece of that, because that's what I'm working a lot with my clients right now, is the level of worthiness.
Exactly.
Because abundance and money is a frequency.
Just a tool.
It's just a frequency, and it's like, why do you want that money, and what are you going to do with it?
Right. And getting in really, really clear about, because any of us can sit around saying, oh, I want money so I can buy some nice shoes, or I can eat my my vegan cupcakes and like all this kind of stuff. But how is that actually serving? How does that actually truly allow you to keep doing what it is? And it's not that anything specific is wrong.
What's its purpose and intention?
Right. And because it all flows back to intention. And then this, by its very nature, goes back to the power of sound. Because you can get really clear about what are you doing with this frequency.
And you're speaking, whatever you're speaking is a frequency.
Totally.
So that's why it's so important to understand the words you're saying. Like, for instance, if you're saying all these great things about someone and then you say but, you completely cancel out all of that.
Exactly.
So being more conscious also of the words you're saying and the power and the frequency and the vibration of what you're saying. Like, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this, or I'm too poor for this, or like, who am I to do this? Like, you're creating a spell for yourself.
Totally. And I mean, I think I think this is the interesting journey of, the whole being lazy part. I'm guilty of it too. I was lazy as shit for 26 years of my life because I wouldn't actually step up and do the work and own my shit. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why I had my awakening, was because Spirit was just like, I did not bring you back. I did not give you this body. I did not, all this stuff is on lease. I didn't even give you your name.
Here's a bitch slap.
Yeah, here is here's not only a bitch slap, but here's a huge kick in the fucking nuts for you to wake the fuck up. Because there was way more to your life than eating, shitting, and praying for something better. And this is something that, a lot of people tend to say that I have a bit more of a crude and more crass approach to my spirituality, but it is the quintessential. It's the quintessential ability to actually be real with it. And this is, I think, if anything, has been the most hilarious part of my journey around my ability to connect with community and to connect with people, is because I don't come off as this, all frou-frou woo-woo, oh, I'm this white angel coming down,
Shanti.
Super Shanti angel, attempting to be your guru or all this kind of stuff that a lot of people do. I'm as quick to call anybody else out on their bullshit that I am on my own.
Totally.
And this is where I think people need to come to realize that spirituality comes in all forms, in the sense of how it looks, in that You don't have to wear a white garb. You don't have to wear a turban. You don't have to do this or that or wear all these crystal jewels. You know, for anybody who has ever seen me in my natural state, I've always found it really funny when people are like, oh my God, whether I'm at a festival or out in the real world, people are like, oh my God, I love your outfit. And I'm like, this isn't a costume. I'm not putting on a mask to exude spiritual pursuit or like to make me look, or to look a specific way. This is an expression of who I am. And the fact that you just interpreted it as that actually says so much more about you than it does about me. And I don't even mean that to be stingy, but more so of that people are going to think of you however which way they are. And whether they place you in a box, whether
Again,
they
it's
place
that
you,
judgment.
yeah, totally. And it's the interesting part about how, as I've come to realize, it's not about sitting there and talking about the proclamation of my spirituality, but I'm just gonna stand here and lead by example of just embodying what I know, embodying my truth, walking forward with that, and let everything else fall by the wayside.
It's because you know your worth, you know your being, you know who you are.
And I think part of that too has come from the fact that I let caution and doubt, I threw it to the winds when all of this happened years ago. Because everything, for the audience that's listening, and I kid you not, with every fiber of my being, of what I speak, that everything that I've experienced, everything that I have intended, everything that I've held space for in this life, for my path, has come true. And I am now at the precipice of creating something far above and beyond what I could have ever imagined. And it requires me an even greater level of space within my body to actually call this in, because I am now at the point where I have to raise millions of dollars to create a temple, all for the namesake of, I don't know. All I know is
to trust.
To trust in that, but spirit, the universe, call it what you will, has told me, this is what I need you to do now.
This is the next step.
This is the next step.
And to create those structures,
right,
to allow that Shakti energy to flow.
Exactly. And this is where I think so much of our journey is so, it can be so disgruntling, because there is such a definitive call to action between what we desire as humans and what we want versus what we need to want. And this is where the power of sound really comes back full spiral actually, to allow us the realization of what are the things that we need to release, what are the things that we resonate, that we keep.
And to be patient along the way.
And to be patient along the way, because what truly is patience? It's the in-between time from one manifestation to another. And this is what I've come to realize through my experience with it, because it's like, oh, there would be one synchronicity to the next one, into the next one, into the next one, and in between that, it was just me waiting.
And being.
And just being. And holding my space, trusting that I'm doing this, not even right, but just trusting that I'm doing.
And knowing that it's coming. If you've already seen it, it's happening.
Right.
It's just you becoming that vibrational match to it.
Yep. And I remember a friend of mine passed this on to me years ago, which has been such a poignant pillar in my whole process over the years of hold the vision, trust the process.
That's my mantra.
And that, you know, and I could speak no truer words of what really allows the embodiment of your dharma, of your path, of the realization of what you're here to do.
And understanding along the way, if it isn't happening when you think it, it's because Spirit's protecting you.
Right. Well, and I think it's also getting real, you know, because I've had some people who like set themselves on a path for a very specific mean, and when they don't get it, they get really disgruntled. And rightfully so. I don't blame them for, you know, not getting this or that, you know, right away. And I think a big part of it too, though, is the capacity for actually spending a moment for checking in with yourself of like, is this actually serving in my highest? Is my pursuit of my art, is the pursuit of my painting, is the pursuit of, you know,
my doing
selling luxury cars, you know, is this serving to its highest, and what am I really supposed to be doing? You know, and like, I had several people this past Burning Man, you know, they were virgin burners, and I didn't get to see them too much on the playa, but I remember connecting with them post-burn during what would still kind of my decompression, and them coming to me and being like, bro, why didn't you tell me that Burning Man would change my life?
Aww.
And I was like, here's my question to you. How did you expect it to not? What were you going in there with, thinking that you would come out on the other side changed? To see a world, to see a complete desert built to
it's like the third largest city in Nevada, and it's only there for a week.
Right. You know, and like, and seeing the interaction with these people, and this really has nothing to do about kind of marketing or trying to bring more persuade people to go to Burning Man, but more so of that for people to understand that there are worlds out there that you know nothing about, and that world is actually a deeper part of yourself. And if you would actually just find the correct things to go explore it with, it's a little bit easier to get into, rather than to be this kind of violent transmutation of, you know, because I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, that the process of becoming who you truly are is usually paved in one of two directions. It's either paved through this kind of slow trickling down of moving through the process and like slowly pulling the threads, or it is paved in your blood, sweat, and your tears. Typically, both roads have both, but one is usually much, much more violent than the other. And that was the path that I took.
Me too, the dismantling of everything.
Because I think that is why also that we are seeing a monumental escalation of awakening in so many people of all different ages, of all different demographics, and even the children who are coming into this world now, the young teenagers and young adults are like, you know, I'm talking to every once in a while, meeting, you know, 20 to 23-year-olds who are
woke,
like so woke, and it's incredible to see where their heads are at, and it's so far out of their ass that it's amazing. Because I was like, wow.
If I was like that when I was 20,
yeah,
where would I be
right,
now?
Totally. You know, and then I have friends who have raised their children on all of this stuff.
Totally.
Since they were young. And you know, now they're like, say 10, 11, 12, and they're just like schooling me on spirituality.
These
just
are kids from the new millennia.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, and it's crazy to me to think that like, wow, you know, like, imagine if we had these tools. And granted, well, let me backtrack on that. Had this access, because the tools were already present.
Totally.
But the access to these things, like long before, you know, I got into rave culture and started doing drugs and DJing and throwing rave parties and all this kind of stuff. You know, and I think that's also another interesting journey around what some would view as the reason to not go into it, is because they would go into it thinking that they're going to lose everything in the fire. Because a lot of people do. Because all the old ways that I was, I can no longer be. When I can tell you, like distinctively that everything I used to do when I was younger, from DJing to throwing gatherings to selling drugs to people to getting people high to doing all these things, is exactly what I'm doing now, but with completely different intentions. Instead of throwing
and
raves,
your drug is music.
and my drug is music. And well, that's always probably, if anything, has always stayed the same. But that being said, it's interesting now that, and this is when I knew, like, I have no control of this. This is when I knew I had to just throw up my hands and just be like, okay, you take it.
And there's no accident with what you've endured either.
Right.
For instance, I run a podcast now. I do interviews. What brought me to this path? Being a music journalist.
Right.
So it's the same energy, the same intention, but it's just like more. It's redefined.
Right. And that's like I think that's the interesting thing, is that like everything that has made us who we are is not something that we have to lose, only if we choose to do so. But everything that we've always had that makes us who we are is actually what truly allows us to breathe
And evolve.
And you know, it is only kind of systemic in a lot of different ways in my life, in that, you know, instead of throwing raves, I'm throwing conscious events. Instead of like spinning turntables, I'm spinning these bowls that also make sound. Instead of getting people high on drugs, I get people high on wellness. And this is when I was kind of like, okay.
There's no accident.
There's no accidents, there's no coincidences. There is only the truth of the matter of who we truly are, and getting really, really, really clear about that. And, you know, for me, especially when it comes to drugs, you know, a lot of people consider ayahuasca to be like the highest of the highs when it comes to like the strongest medicine that you can do for self-realization, for all of these things. And I remember in my first journey with the medicine, I remember Pachamama came out of the medicine as I was attempting to relate the sensation of being on ayahuasca with something else I've experienced in my life. You know, to create some type of parallel so that I wouldn't freak out. And I remember when I felt the sensation of like, oh my God, this kind of feels like my spiritual awakening, wrapped up in a bow, well, more like a roller coaster, and smushed into an 8-hour journey. And I remember when I had that realization, I was maybe 4 hours into the medicine. I remember hearing this voice come out of the medicine, speaking to me, being like, I'm glad that you realize that now. Because now you can see the connection between your awakening, this medicine, the connection to the planet, and the connection to your reality. And by the way, if you ever need to find me, you know where to look. And that was my interpretation, that it's not the medicine that I need to find her. All I have to do is just look within. And that everything that we have, everything that we need, is within our DNA. And all the ancestral ties, all the ancestral lineage, all of everything that we ever will be, could be, should be, and will become has already been transcribed in the reality of the template of our universe. And this whole idea that time is an illusion, I used to believe it, but I don't anymore. The universe requires time as memory because we see time as this whole like forward moving thing, right? When in reality, time is just like sound. It's 3-dimensional in the sense that it's a sphere, so it goes in every direction. So our access to our past, to our present, to our future is constantly evolving, shifting, interacting, and through the access that we can kind of dial into because of sound, how it completely warps and changes our perception of time, allows us this kind of like much more intimate corridor into being able to pull and remove very specific blockages that don't allow what vision you hold in the process that you're trusting to allow to come to pass. And if people can get really clear on that relationship that they have with all these things, you can achieve anything. And I say that from a person who had every doubt of any of this 7 years ago. Because I didn't believe in any of these things. I dabbled in a little bit of the esoteric stuff, dabbled into tarot cards and astrology and all these things since I was young, but there was never anything in my life that was so prevalently obvious that this shit was real. And the testament that I have to that belief is sewn into the very fabric of my path that I have walked over the past 7 years.
And that's why you feel that when you perform.
And yeah, and that's the energy that I emit. It is the embodiment of intention that I carry for the purpose of humanity to actually actualize to why we're here as a species on this planet and what we can do with it. Not only in the restoration of our planet, not in the saving of it, just restoring.
Totally, it doesn't need saving.
Mother Earth doesn't need to be saved. She's good. She'll kill us if she wants to. She's getting close, you know. She will. She's in charge. Yeah, she's in charge. You know, that is clearly enough. But if there's anything that I've come to realize, she believes.
She's self-organizing.
She's self-organizing, but she's also, as scary as this statement might be, I think she actually believes that we can actually save ourselves. Despite what we have done to her. Despite the things that we have done in the name of consumerism, of capitalism, and all of these things. Because if it weren't for that, why are we still here? Why are we having this conversation? Why are we all having this conversation in some way, shape, or form?
She's holding that space for us to have these experiences and to heal.
And I think this is why she's kind of been calling to the medicine, to calling to the Shakti, to calling to the Kundalini, to wake these motherfuckers up, because this is the last chance I'm giving them.
Totally. This is the 11th hour for humanity.
Totally. And and it's not even a whole proclamation of doom and gloom. Totally. But more so of that, it is a kind of, I don't even want to say a call to arms, because
what's war?
It's war. We're not in spiritual warfare. We are in a opportunity to become more aware of connection, of our relationship, not only to ourselves but to this planet,
and the intention,
and the intention of how that ripples out into the universe. Because imagine if humanity woke up tomorrow and the aliens literally just came out of nowhere and was like, oh my god, you guys finally figured it out, good. Welcome to the galactic community. Welcome to the golden age of your planet. Because you guys finally got out of your fucking head, got out of your asses, reconnected with your planet and your heart and the heartbeat that exists within all of us. And now you can actually be part of it. You can be part of the whole universe. And this whole idea of, are we alone? Fuck no, you're not alone. Do you think we are that egotistical to believe that we must be the only beings in the whole universe that got gifted
to be on this planet
with the idea of self-realization?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
totally.
this is where so much of how the power of sound can unlock all of these mysteries, and how, in the ancient yogic texts, they talk about the first sound was Om.
And the breath,
And the breath, yeah, totally. And so many.
Even in the Bible, it says, in the beginning was the word, which is sound.
Totally, and I think, and it's so funny that so many people who are Christian, Judeo-Christian, Islamic, and this isn't necessarily to point the finger at them, but more so that like these dogmas, these ideologies, and all these things, and it's not even just to Western, because I totally point the finger at Eastern cultures too, but at least some of them have a little bit more of a kind of like spaciousness of being like, okay, maybe it doesn't have to be so dogmatic. Maybe it actually can be quite liberating to embrace every aspect of sound, energy, connection, and all this stuff. And in the praising of the all high, that it doesn't need to be all this war and death and like
fighting, combative,
religious tolerance.
Totally.
Tolerance is, don't get me wrong, in a certain way, I'm all for tolerance. But it has to move beyond just tolerance to acceptance.
Totally.
Like the tolerance doesn't mean shit if you don't accept a person for who they are and for the beliefs that they believe in. Because if you're just tolerating them, that means that you're just passing judgment that you're either better than them or that what you believe is
It's like a settlement of the person in front of you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why?
Embrace everyone. We need to embrace our uniqueness.
Yeah, you know, and it's like it's our differences that make us stronger, and it's our humanity that allows us to dip really deep into that aspect of acceptance, and to see beyond, see beyond our skin color, see beyond our pigment, see beyond our hair, see beyond the
Sexual
physical traits,
orientation,
and all these things, and it's like, and sound really allows us that opportunity to see each other, not for our bodies, but for our souls. And if we could only live by a greater mean towards that intention, how much our world would change tomorrow.
So what does sovereignty mean to you?
Boundaries. True boundaries. Sovereignty to me means that what is yours, and what is mine is mine. And I'm not going to project any of what is mine onto you. And that I have full awareness to my sovereign awareness and being, so as to not attempt to manipulate, stress, or create friction or pressure on your process to make my experience easier.
You do you.
And you do you. And we'll meet somewhere in the middle through the texture of our being.
And our awareness, right?
Because regardless of the fact, dissonance is going to be created when vibration first encounters with itself, in whatever way, shape, or form. If there's anything I've come to learn through the sound. But if there's anything that sound teaches us, the end result is always harmony. Even as much as the sound waves break up and create all of these dissonant patterns, there is at some point a level of not only harmony, but there is also oneness between the two sounds in whatever way it comes, in whatever way, however many vibrations are within the space, however long it takes. The end goal is always harmony. And I think if people could wake up and realize that, how that would change the relationships that they have with themselves, with their families, with their friends, with their coworkers, and very much ultimately with what they want to do here on the planet. And to be able to be a facilitator of that, to be a contributor to that legacy of how humanity came not necessarily out of duality, but came out of the ignorance of separation. I could think of no better thing that I could leave the world with. And whether I'm remembered for it or nothing, it doesn't really matter. level of accomplishment in my life is to know that I contributed my whole life to that intention, and to hopefully see a greater level of coherence and peace of mind that intention can hopefully hold space for as a container. And this is why, in going into my 34th year, I still have a lot of work to do. I still have a lot of things to share. And this has been the slight beauty of getting really clear about this, because it has brought individuals like yourself and all those that I've encountered through all these years into my path, and to only work towards a greater union of that vision.
And you'll find those people, you'll find each other when you allow yourself to be who you are.
Totally.
You find your tribe, your community, whatever you want to call it, when you allow yourself to authentically be you.
Yep. And and that goes with that whole saying that,
your vibe attracts your tribe.
Your vibe attracts your tribe, and the more that you are more authentically you, the more it gives and creates the space for others to be themselves.
You give them permission.
Right. And that, I think, is,
That's part of the community part, right? That we're talking about. Like, if you're constantly numbing out using different, like, drugs or medicines or whatever, addictions, whatever they are, because you're looking for that community. And that's why that all ties back to you allowing yourself to be authentically you.
Yep.
You allowing yourself to be vulnerable, which is the force of the golden era, which is the force of this new paradigm, is pure vulnerability, because the people who see you, they will respect you. And the people who understand you, it's because they see that within themselves. And there's that correlation of, I see you.
Yep, totally. And I think that's, like another aspect to our humanity that we, for the first time in a long time, are finally having the opportunity to really dive deep into, both for men and women. More for who, I don't know yet.
Because it's different.
It's different for both.
For every person, too.
For every orientation.
Like, some women are more to their feminine, and they need to bring a little more of the masculine. Some women are too masculine, and they need to bring more in their feminine, and vice versa.
For men. And that ability
to find that congruency.
And that ability to be seen. And to be heard. And
but guess what? That space as well, which is helped created through sound.
Right. And I think this is, because this is all we're doing, whether people realize it or not, all we're doing is just attempting to be understood.
And seen.
And that's all we want from each other.
Yep.
Like, I don't need your passing judgments. I don't need your pity. I don't need this or that. Don't get me wrong. Everyone wants the unconditional love, but through unconditional love comes understanding.
And validate yourself first.
Yeah. And I think that journey of realization combined with the reclamation to your self-worth, to your purpose in life, to the intention of what you plan to do with both of those, combined with then being understood for the previous three ideas of how you live your life and what you do it for, in a grounded capacity, not just floating in the sky like a fucking fairy, but that you can actually ground it out into the world, bring it to life.
That's the embodiment.
And share it for all of humanity to see.
Yeah.
And it's wild to me to read these stories of nurses who talk about the 25 things that they hear most commonly from people who are on their deathbed. to people who are insanely rich in this world and the things that they talk about on their deathbed. If anybody hasn't ever read about what Steve Jobs talked about in his passing moments from cancer, go read it. It's amazing what this man who had everything in the world, had every ability to do whatever he wanted, to affect the world however he wanted. In his dying breath, the things he talked about. It's pretty wild.
Beautiful.
You know, and like this whole process of, you know, like consumerism, this whole, you know, Instagram selfies, the whole beauty world and all this stuff, consumerism and materialistic good, and to have bigger and brighter and better shit. It's not that I'm not for it, but don't make your life about it. When your life becomes less about money and more about you and the things that you want to do, the passions that you want to share, the art that you want to create. The art, just to be clear, doesn't mean that you have to pick up a paintbrush or do a sculpture or create, you know, like some monumental mural. Your art is your life. Your art is who you are.
It's how you express yourself.
It's how you express yourself, and getting really, really deeply connected to that and how your art expresses to the world. You know, there are people in this world who will not, for whatever reason, ever dance in their life. There are people in this world who will never travel to another country. And not even that I pity them. But why? Why would you not take the opportunity? Just for once. To do something
Get out of your
different.
comfort zone.
Yeah, get out of your comfort zone.
Totally.
You know, like, if anybody who's listening to this can think about it, the whole reason why we're here is because of risk. There's a reason why we're here. It didn't just come because, oh, you know what, the universe is just going to stay comfortable. And we're just going to be like, you know,
We're just passing through.
we're just passing through. Or we're just like carbon atoms, you know, just kind of like moving through and kind of, you know, covalently or ionically bonding with this and this and that. No, those atoms took risks by giving up part of their electrons and all this stuff to recombine and constitute with this, to create that, to then create this, to then eventually.
Because everything you want is on the other side of that comfort zone.
Right. You know, and it's like, whatever you're playing towards in terms of your security is a fallacy. There is no such thing as security. There's only the idea of it. And what you construct around the idea of your security are the very illusions that you have to give up if you are truly to embody the life that you really, really want to live. You know, I remember talking to a friend of mine back home in DC once. You know, he makes good money. He makes like close to 7 figures. And I remember one evening we were hanging out at his house with one of my best friends, and you know, she was talking to me about, like, you know, I really admire the fact that you pursue the things that really make you tick. The fact that you're willing to risk it all for the namesake of that you got to live the life that you wanted to, rather than live the life that you've been told to. And then he chimed in, because he was a little drunk, and he was like, you know, I've always wanted to do this and this and that. Actually, to be clear, he's always wanted to own a snorkeling company in Mexico and just take people around and go snorkeling. And I was like, okay, if that's your true belief, and that's what you really truly want to do, and that's what would make you feel fulfilled, out of all the money you make, how much of it would you be willing to take as a pay cut to just live that way? And he was like, I'd give up 2/3 of it just to live that life. And that, to me, was unfortunately such a tall, telling theme to our reality of what we live in terms of our society. That this whole pursuit of money, this whole pursuit of materialistic goods, it means nothing comparatively to what we can actually achieve through what we feel is actually the accomplishment of our success, of what we,
And our contribution to humanity.
and our contribution to to humanity, but also to what makes us want to wake up every morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you spend 65 years of your life waking up from 9 to 5 to go to a job, pay for a house that you never are in, have a family that you never get to fucking spend time with, because you were constantly doing this very specific thing that doesn't even allow you
to live,
but to just be alive. And this is something that people need to understand, that like, this isn't what you came here for, that there is so much more out there to life. You know, going back to what my friends talked about when I was telling her about, like, you know, when she was telling me about her friends, like, you know, judging her or this or that, I remember she was mentioning, like, you know, I want to visit every national park before I'm 55. And I was like, you're 35 now. That means you have 20 years. There's over 60 national parks in the whole country. Do it before you're 45. Fuck it, do it now. What's stopping you? You make $100,000 a year, and you're gonna tell me that you can't? Honestly, pardon my language, but go fuck yourself. Seriously, like, who the fuck do you think you are? Go live your life the way you want to, rather than trying to create this idealism of security, of what will then allow you to live your life.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be joking me. You know, like, we only have so much time on this planet. Reminded to me of the amount of funerals I've been to, the amount of people I've had to put in the ground, unfortunately.
So how are you gonna make the most of it?
Right. You're gonna make the most of it by going to a job 9 to 5 every day. You gotta be kidding me. And taking what is maybe the most 2 to 3 weeks.
Because there's really good health insurance.
Right. Or, oh, severance pay is this much. Or, oh, my time off is only 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Oh, actually, I get the 3rd week.
Oh, and 401k.
Yeah. The
But
power
when you're
is,
doing what you love, you will be abundantly
right,
provided for.
and
And everyone's form of abundance looks differently.
yeah, and you know, everybody has their own connection to their process of how they achieve these things. But what matters most is the capacity of what you're willing to give up, what things you are willing to let go of. Because trust me, for whoever's listening to this, whether you realize it or not, if you don't find your way, Spirit will. And it'll make, between the rude awakening and the gentle awakening into the dream, take it from me that you don't want the rude awakening, because that's what happened to me 7 years ago.
Totally, me too. And it's been challenging,
And it's very challenging.
I mean, I wouldn't take any, like, you know, it's brought me to this very moment and allows us to hold the space that we do.
Right.
And at the same time, there's another alternative.
There's a complete other alternative, and I still to this day don't fully know which one's better. On one hand, the rude awakening set me on the path in a very strong, in a very, like, affirmative way.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's others who I've seen who have taken, I don't want to say the slow path.
It's a softer approach.
But it's the softer approach. And, you know, like, if you're sitting on money, if you've got all this money that's just sitting in your bank account, go do something with it. Don't hoard it.
It's
Go
an
travel.
energy.
You know, like, I have a friend back home who lives right down the street from my house. I remember the last time, her and I don't unfortunately stay in contact as much as we used to, but I remember in the time that we did, I remember she was telling me, like, you know, because she still lived at home. This was like when she was like 28. And she still lived at home with her parents. I think at that time, she had like, because she divulged to me when she was a little drunk, like, oh yeah, I'm like sitting on like $60,000. And I was like, to do what with? And she was just like, well, I don't know, I'm just like saving up for a house. And I was like, okay, cool. We haven't talked in about maybe 6 years. She still lives at her house with her parents. So that 60K, God knows how much that money is now, if that's what she's been doing with it. And I remember the last time we talked, we recently reconnected not too long ago. And I was just like, why don't you like go do this? Or, you know, because she would talk to me about like, I want to go to Hawaii, or like, I want to go, you know, like travel the European corridor and just like go travel on the trains and go meet people and all this stuff. And I was like, so why don't you? And she was just like, well, because I don't have enough money. And I was like, you had $60,000 the last time I saw you, which was years ago. You still are in the same situation. I can only imagine how much money you have now, and you're still going to tell me that you don't have enough money. What fear is stopping you from going out there
and living your life
and learning more about yourself? And this goes back to this whole aspect of people being lazy. Not about their hard work, but about their personal development. Stop being lazy about it.
Invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Use that money to invest in your well-being
Totally.
and of your self-realization of who you truly are.
And it's like, you know, and I get it. It's scary to know who you are. Because you might actually find out you've been fooled. That you've been told a lie. That you've been living for however many fucking years. And nobody wants to feel a fool. Nobody likes to feel like they got hoodwinked. But the reality of it is, I don't even want to say get over it. Better get on with it.
Go do something about it.
Go do something about it. Would you prefer to keep living that lie and keep actually being in the illusionary process of the awareness that you are living that lie? Or would you actually like to come to terms that you've been lied to and that you took responsibility for actually doing something about it? And this is where and why, in so many different ways, I do what I do with my life now. Some of it is an ode of a fuck you to the society that would have told me to be who I am. And part of it is a honoring in every breath of who I am today, because I said no, and because I took responsibility for it.
Your life. So if there's one thing, one quick thing, this conversation's been so good, I knew it would be. Shane's like one of the only friends that can keep up with me with talking. Facts. If there's one little lightning round, like truth to share with people after all of this, what would you first say to younger Shane? And what would you like to everyone else to really understand?
If there was anything I could tell my younger self, well, we would have to somewhat preface it. The younger self before the awakening and the younger self after.
Whatever is coming to you right now. Probably before.
If I were to have to tell my younger self before my awakening anything, if there was anything I could send through the ether back to my past, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time involving yourself in things of no worth.
Oh, that makes me so emotional.
Because not that time is wasted.
It's just precious.
It's just precious. And spend time with your parents. Because there are things that life can throw you that you can't anticipate. And the things that we take for granted. Spend time with the people you care about. Because the only thing that matters is what you care about. And part of that is getting clear on what matters.
Oh, I love you, man.
Love you too. And like, don't waste it. Don't waste it, you know, seeking approval, wasting your time, like, you know, about looking a specific way, being a specific way, how much money you make, what college you went to, what clearance you have. Because in the end, you can't take any of it with you. All that matters is the time that you spent, because it's the only thing that you can't ever get back. Being with the people that matter most. And for God's sakes, just treat each other better. Which by extension, treat yourself better.
Thank you, brother, for your vulnerability, your realness, your journey, your commitment, your passion, your purpose, your beingness. Allowing that space for anyone who's listening and anyone whose lives you touch, the hundreds of thousands of people who have seen you. Share your medicine and live your truth.
It's weird to think that the numbers could be that high now.
Totally. It's like you're truly like living proof of embodiment of like your beingness of who you are and just being who you are.
I appreciate that.
Tell us where we can find you.
So you can find me on Facebook at Shane Thunder, or
Is there any dots or anything?
No, just Shane Thunder. If you look me up on Facebook, it's that super easy. I would give you my last name, but it's gonna be a mouthful. You can also find me at spiritmedicine.com, but medicine is spelled METACINE. You can also find me on Instagram that way. And then I pretty much share sound healing all throughout Los Angeles, all throughout California. I travel a little bit here and there abroad when I can, and definitely due to being featured on Most Expensivest, I'm starting to, people have been reaching out to me from every various corner of the earth now, which is kind of a little wild. But that being said, if you want to experience any sound healing, I highly recommend going to it, whether it be with me or somebody else. Take the opportunity to. You don't have to look far these days now.
No.
You know, to experience it. And if you're ever in California, definitely hit me up.
He's the best, guys, truly, and the team that he brings with him, it's...
I appreciate that.
I feel like I only go to festivals now to go experience Shane.
So good.
Like literally, the one festival I went to this year, I spent more time in Shane's like sound baths than I did like watching DJs, and that's truth.
So good. So good. If there's no greater truth that I've heard, it's that one. But yeah, definitely check it out. If you need to get in touch with me about anything.
All of your links will be below in the show notes too.
Totally. And if you have any comments, concerns, criticisms, I'm totally open to them. I speak everything from my heart. I mean to offend nobody, but I mean to hopefully bring awareness to everyone of some level of consciousness. And I love and unconditionally love every being on this planet in whatever way that I can. And I mean to definitely not offend anybody for whatever creed, path, or journey that they are on. And if you found any concerns or dislikes about any of my comments, let's talk about it, because there's usually a greater truth that can be revealed to both of us.
This is how we resolve.
And this is how we grow, not only as a being on this planet, but this is how we grow as a community. And don't feel like you're bothering me or burdening me with your stories, or like, hey, bro, fuck you. I take that too. So, and I take it with a grain of salt, and I take it with every capacity that I can of not being triggered by any emotional state of how you may be receiving any of this conversation.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you for the journey, and thank you for the opportunity to share.
Oh, thank you. I knew, when you came into my house this round, I was like, dude, we're jumping on the mics. I feel like when I switched from sovereign goddess to sovereign society, opening the doors for men, you are hands down top of my list of people I wanted to talk with.
Well, I super appreciate that.
Yes, and thank you everyone for listening, and just really allow yourself to take what resonates and leave the rest, and to really start thinking about what we shared, and start really feeling into your body what feels expansive, and go for that. Follow that, because that's what's going to open the doors for you. That's going to create all the abundance and the opportunities and the connections and the community that you've been searching for, and most importantly, within you. Because again, the inner is creating the outer, so all of this is just an experience for you to dive in deeper to who you are, at your truth, at your core, what you've always known but may have forgotten. And so we are just in this process of deep unlearning, reprogramming, and stepping into our power. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Shane. And we look forward to hearing how this resonates with you. So have a great one. And if you feel like you need a journal, because I feel like a lot of people are going to be journaling after this episode, here's your permission slip, right? Permission granted. So go for it and see what comes through. We love you so much, and thank you again. Take care. Satnam.